our the political economy of industrialization and Indonesia-Korea relations. And for the first session is by Professor Lee from Korea University. And without any further ado, I will give the platform to Professor Lee. Please.
Good morning, everyone. Somebody is in this room, and somebody in Zoom in Indonesia here. I'm Choong Lyol. I'm a professor of economics at Korea University at Sejong. And maybe see the slide. I'm going to explain on the Korean economy. I mean, not the Indonesian economy, so that you are not expert, I am the expert. I'm going to explain what you like to listen to that Korean economy is. It's a quick look. I mean, if you're looking at the Korean history, say I have to say about 60 years. I mean, when we have economic development in 1962. But this is only 1.5, so I will quick review on this things. First one is introduction, second is I'm talking to the Korea and Korean. I'm going to skip this, but I like to, because what is Korea and who is Korea is very important to explain the Korea's economic fast development. At the same time, that made the difference between Korea and Indonesia, so that it is not, we could not apply the same stories to Indonesia, because you are Indonesian, the differences, right? Different social, cultural things and history, so that, but I just like that a few things is different from Korean and Indonesian, not just in good or bad, I'm saying there's just a difference, right? And President has to Korea, and so what happened? Early days and crisis and those things. I mean, the crisis means the same crisis which you have in 1997. So that before the 1997, there's a whole stories changes in Korea, like you did here. So that how could it be possible for that? Yeah. And one of the lowest income country in the world, and to the highest income countries. That's true here. And past years, many stages of development. Making sure like 7 5-year economic development plan. And 2 financial crises. 1 pandemic crisis. I mean, these are the same, but crisis cases. But the difference is that 7 terms of 5-year development plan. And Korea's experiences maybe help, not all, but a few things. I mean, just 1.5 lectures, yes? You can catch one or two elements of my lecture, then I think this is successful. Okay, that's it. These are the story of Korean economy for 6 years. I mean, 1945, a long time ago, liberation. Like you did here. We were after World War II. We were liberated. After Japan was defeated, we came. And 48, we have our government, so the 1948. And we have a war, 50 to 53. And about more than 1 million people died. It's not a simple civil war, it's 1 million people died. And we have Students' Revolution in 1960. Military coup d'etat in 1960. Okay, so right. We have a military coup d'etat in 1961. So up to this point, maybe many of the developing countries who became independent after 1945, after World War II, it's the same thing. Similar things happened inside there. Civil war, coup d'etat, revolution, those are the things. And all those things changes after 1962. We have 5-year economic development plan. It goes to 1996, and that was quite successful. So what I want to say is that what was the 7 5-year economic development plan era, during that time what happened, and we have 1997 crisis, which Indonesia did, we call it Asian financial crisis. Then we have changed our complete system completely. In other words, more market friendly and liberal opening policies, like you did here. And so we changes. During that time, we have uprising, struggles, candle strike. Those are the things of political events. So that on the bottom side, we have a lot of political events. On the upside, we show some of the economic growth. So GDP per capita, Say, I said that the blue line, the blue bar, that was a two oil shock in 74 and 79, Asian financial crisis, 97 and 8, global financial crisis, 2008, and final one is the pandemic crisis, year 2000. So the except is red bar, always GDP has been increases. There's no problem to have a, so Korean people, once he was born in 1960s and always think that here our economy is growing. Because of from the history, they haven't think that economy should grow, except these few crisis cases. So the big question is how did the Korean economy change or develop so quickly and so much for the past 7 decades? And the question is, the answer is that we had the who is Korea and Korean, and how different the Korea today's economy and early days of the Netherlands. So the question is that how Korean economy is changing so much and so quickly. Now these two questions I want to answer. And most foreigners, including you, see the Korea's economy. I mean, you are not born in 1940s, so that you don't know what happened in 1960s, 70s, 80s, year 2000. So that's what I'm going to say. I was born in 59. So it's a long time ago. So I experienced all of these things. And you see here, the point was a 5-year economic development plan was first began in 1962. So I am the witness, although I was 4 years old. I know what happened. Okay, so I told you. So who is Korea? So you know the map of this. You are able to read this, right? It's far away from your country. And geological location is a small country. Is how small it is compared with your country. Look at the red. It's 10,000 square kilometers. Indonesia, 1,904.4 thousand square kilometers, far smaller than here. And 70% important, 70% of the land is here, mountains, and only 20% of arable land. So that for the 1,000 years, Korean people always suffer from the food shortage because the land is very scarce. So that's true. And mind we are the 4 seasons, right? That's right. And the geological location and temperature make Korean people rice production for 1,000 years, and rice is not enough. So we always have a food shortage problem. Geopolitical, we have southern part of the Korean peninsula located between China, Japan, and Russia here. So it makes the Korea system and culture to be influenced by the 2 major forces. One is, say, like China. 1,000 years we are influenced by the Chinese system, we do that. At the same time, in the modern 20th century, we are influenced by Japan and maybe US. So that it's like a mix. So 2 civilizations was mixing here, Chinese culture, and we say the Japanese and Western cultures. So 2 cultures are mixing together. So the old generation, like old, maybe 70 years old generation, more than that, they are influenced by Japanese and Japanese cultures. And young people are more influenced by US cultures, Western cultures. Those are the things. So those are mixed. So it's very important because early stage of development, a development plan and will be policy was implemented by the government. And those are the people at the time, 1960s, 70s, those are the people who participated in the economic activity, was educated during the Japanese colonial period, and also early days of careers. That means they are greatly influenced by those other things. So geopolitical location is this. But Russia also important because they are influenced by North Korea. Right. So several things are from before the 19th century. Buddhism, Confucianism, kingdom system. All these are from China. So that we are greatly influenced by China. We cannot deny it. After the 19th century, all these words like human right, school culture, those are from Japanese. And Western cultures from Japanese, those are the mixed here. So therefore, World War II, the democracy, market economy, and enterprise, those concepts from US. So the 3 things are mixed, and these are the mixed country. So that was always struggles. Young generation and old generation, there's a struggles. That's a Korean modern days. And that's also the territories of Korea. Why I show this territory is because it's important. Why? Because since around about 11th centuries, we never been get out of the Korean peninsula. So we are isolated country. So it's different from your country. I mean, Indonesian people, if you like, there's a sea here. You may go to India, you may go to other countries for 1,000 years by sea. For Koreans, no. We live in isolated, it's not island, but peninsula we are located here. And the 8th century is the Manchuria area, northern area, that although is claimed by Korean, but it's a mix, Korean and Japanese. Sorry, Korean and Chinese, so it's a mix. So that we may say the current border is made by the 14th centuries and also 11th centuries. Over 1,000 years our border didn't change. In other words, Korean never communicated with other countries. We always stick to the Korean peninsula, very isolated people here. And the 2,000 years of history, you know that. And religion is also important here. I mean, one of the Christian religion is introduced in the 18th, 19th century. And it's different. It's a big difference from other colonial countries. Why? Most of the colonial countries was made by the colony by European people. Then we have our cultures and religions, but European people came here, and they are Christians. They tried to Christianize the country. That was a fact. In most of the colony in Asia and Africa, so that most of the independence means against the maybe Christianism. That was related with this. If you like to be independent, if you like to be nationalistic, you are against for the such as this Christianism. But story is different here. Korea was the Christianism introduced in 19th century. Actually, we are colonized by Japan. Japan does not use Japan is not in favor of the Christianism. So that most of the Christians in Korea was fight against the Japanese. So that's a big difference. So the Koreans are very friendly with the Christianism because they are most of the maybe foreign, maybe American priests, American fathers and religious men, Christian men fought in favor of Korea for the independence of this country. So that's why the Koreans are very familiar, in favor of this Christianism. Many Koreans like to be a Christian. So that here is a religion is not matters in Korean. So that they're very generous, and people say that, and some Western people could not understand. Said, okay, what is your religion? I said, okay, well, I didn't have any. Most of the Korean young people didn't have religions, but they have like 20 or 25 years old. And they choose one of the religions sometimes. But Western people could not understand. I mean, you may not understand how the people can choose the religions. Because it is given by fathers, families, and maybe villages. Once you was born as a Christian, used to be Christian. Once you are born as a Islam, used to be Islam here. But in Korea, we don't care about those things. About 20 years old, I think I like to be a Christian. I think I like to be some Buddhism. And we chose it. Very, very strange cases here. So that no religion is about 50% here. So religious thing does not influence much in the Korea's life. Those are the things. So no conflict, actually. That was happening. Because of the Christian was introduced in 19th century and they work for the Koreans' independence in old ages, right? We have a conflict, Cold War in 50 to 53, and still conflicting, right? And instability is discouraged. That's the big, that's a present, that's a big, small introduction of Korea. This is a present and past over here. Okay, GDP per capita in 1953. Why I choose 1953? 1953 is the first year the Bank of Korea make these statistics. Before that, we don't have that statistics here. And at that time, it was $65. $0.7. We make first time in 1953. And 2020 is $31,637. It's big differences. And this is a simple number. How it changed the people's life, and it has been increases. You see this, it continuously increases, such as this. It's quite surprising thing. And what was the life of Korean has been changed for these years is the growth rate, I say. This is a meat consumption of Koreans. Meat include beef, pork. We are not Muslim, so that we eat pork, enjoy it. And beef, meat, and maybe everything here. Lambs and In 1965, Koreans eat about 3.4 kilograms of meat. Very small amount, such as this per year. Talking to you. And 250 grams per month, which is about, in Korean cases, maybe 2 dishes. Generally, we go to the beef restaurant. One dish is about 150 grams. But young people used to eat about 4 dishes, but just alone here. So this is the 250 grams of meat is simply 2 dishes a month was the average here. But today is over 53.9 kilograms per year. Right? In other words, people enjoy the beef and pork and other things. I mean, food has been very diverse. This is a traditional houses, like that's how we call it here. And most of the houses was this. Even in Seoul here, metropolitan Seoul area, when I was a university student in Korea, and in Seoul here, in front of my gate of my university, that kind of house was located. Now it is in the Golden Museum. But when I was a university student, those houses was located in front of my university gate. That's right. Now it's a modern apartment district. So housing changed, food changed. And also we have changed our system. I mean, that was in 1960 when we have a revolution. There was a students' revolution, as I told you, for 1960, about 6 years ago. So we have a revolution and the military tank was on the street and people cheers the success of the military. And now we don't use that kind of protest anymore. Simply we use a candle. We try to explain ourselves. We use a simple candle and go to the street. I mean, even today, if you go to some area in Seoul metropolitan center area, people showing their opinion, use this candle here. So that's a big development. Here's freedom is now free. Okay, 1960s, 80s, and 2017 and 2087. So we change our system, and sometimes we get out of the prison. Get rid of the president, and we do that. I mean, you have the same in most of the developing country who became independent after World War II has a similar situation. War, civil war, like protest, and change of the government. Those are quite common, and we did the same things here as I'm talking. And here the GDP per capita of Korea is 1960s. So I show this table to my students. Believe it or not, Korea's GDP per capita, per income is about 30% of Senegal in Africa. So, Senegal is why important in Korea because we imported fish today. Although we imported fish is called galchi, right? Most of those fish is imported from Senegal. So the Korean people know the Senegal because of their fishes. And 1960s, Korea's GDP per capita is about 30% of Senegal, and it changes, right? 70s, I changed the Senegal, Kenya, and Ghana in Africa, Portugal, Spain, and Greece in Europe, Southern Europe, Brazil and Argentina, and Latin America, and Turkey and Iran in Middle East, Thailand and India, the Asia, and Korea is the bottom. So 1960s of these countries, Korea is the last one. 70s, we may pass to Thailand and India. And some of the countries in Kenya and Ghana here, but still it's far lower than European country. And 90s, we passed to the Latin American country and Middle East. And here's 2020, so we are again of this. So that was an achievement we did in 60 years, right? So that's why Korea is very proud of this thing and try to say something. So that when I show these pictures, people are very surprised. People never seen those kind of graphics before. So that's really, you don't have to write down the people. You can have these slides and files and after these classes, right? You can have this. Don't take a picture. Okay, don't take a picture of me, not this. Okay. So you can have this old slide. Okay, here's the GDP of Korea. GDP means the whole size of economy here. Number 10 in 2010 here, that's right here. The world, the US is the number 1, China's G2 is number 2, and Japan, Germany, and Korea is number 10. And GDP per capita, Korea was the 26. I mean, the Luxembourg and Swiss, Ireland and Norway is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but those are the small countries. Luxembourg, for example, is less than 1 million, so the very small city. So that I'm trying to have country with population is more than 10 million. So there is green bar. So US, Germany, Canada, France, UK, Japan, Italy, and Korea. That was 2020. But in 2021, it changed in Italy and Korea, even though I didn't upgrade it here. So the Korea became 25. So I would say the country with a population more than 10 million, I said the GDP's Korea is number, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we said that we became a member of G7 today, right? And we believe that we want to increase continuously until, but it takes a time to, the number, we are ahead of Italy this year, and but the next one is Japan, but it's far away, as you can see. Japan is, but this year is already, maybe, but this year, the Japanese yen has depreciated so much. So that if you converted the GDP per capita in terms of US dollar, Japan's GDP will fall by, I think, around 5% more than that. Then Korea will be increases, then maybe, if you continue this thing, then not this year, maybe next year, Korea may be very similar to the Japanese one. So that's the truth. So that is the achievement. And then next thing, what happened? This is what you like to do, right? What you like to listen, right? What happens in the early days. So there are two parties, what's early days is and late days is, okay? I mean, the critical point was the Asian financial crisis. Here is before industrialization, that's also illustrated. Believe it or not, when Korea was liberated in 1945, about 78% of Korean people could not read and write. The best thing is only 22% of people can read. So we give iPhone to these people, cannot use it, right? They cannot text it. About 78% of people, they could not write and read and write here. But about 15 years later, it changed. 22 people cannot read, 78 people write. That's a very important achievement in their cases. So they make many elementary schools, just even that they try to reduce this thing. That was the achievement of the first president. He was a step down because of the revolution. He was a dictator. But one of the best things he do is that he reduced illiteracy rate, so people can read and write. Make a school every places in the country. That's his achievement here. This is the Korean War. I mean, that's also Korean War 50 to 53. I mean, why I show these things? Because, look at this. The first thing that began with June 25th of 1950s. It was divided by, we call it 38 parallels. And the red one is North Korea, blue one is South Korea. And 3 months later, that was the border area, September 14th, 1950, is like North Korean army occupied almost 70%, 80% of South Korea. So that only blue one is very strict. And 3 months later, the blue one cover up the all the more than half of the North Korean area. And after that, as you see, the Korean Peninsula is divided by the S-before here. The reason I show this is that here, for 3 years of Korean War, all the North and South Korean areas are battlefield. And Ukraine, when you're looking at the recently nuclear war here, then said only the battles has happened to the border area from Russia to Ukraine. Those are the things used to happen. But in the Korean War case, it's different. One is that sometimes it's like Busan is the only port is supported by the South Korea here. So these places. So why the Busan has become a big port? Because during the Korean War, the Busan area is the only port can be supported by maybe US and other countries. So that this city became bigger here. So in other words, all of the country was a battlefield. That means everything was destroyed. Something was done during the colonial period, like highway or railroad was built. But during the Korean War, we destroyed everything. I mean, the South Korean, North Korean army fighting, all this Korean peninsula was destroyed, everything. So that nothing was left. That's why I explain these things. So the Korean War destroyed all economic infrastructures and private capital. That's the thing. And revolution was happening in 1960 because there was a dictator, and he tried to rule it, and so the students make a protest. And on the center of the Seoul Street, these are the policemen here. They shoot their rifles to university student, and about 150 students died. Then make a revolution. That was in 1960. All day 60 years old. And the government was built after the revolution was very big, and they are incapable of anything here. So that this person here, President Park Chung-hee, and he's a major general, two-star general. He make a revolution. He make a coup d'etat. May 16, 1960. I was confused by 60, just 1 year later here. And also he ruled it. Later he became a president. I mean, he said he became a president after election. So that he is legitimated one here. Even though he made a coup d'etat, when he became a president, he was selected as an election. So that's one thing. And he made Ministry of Economy for the first time. He made 5-year economic development plan. That's why it's important. You know, he was also, one side he was a dictator, other side he made an economic development plan and implemented it. And it was quite successful. So that he was a two-sided person from the Korean side. Still, there was a debate. He's a great person, but he's a worse person in Korea. Still it's debated, right? Here's a data from 1962. We have GDP, and we have thing, and until 1996, we have a 7 economic 5-year development plan here. And there was a target, left side, first one target, and there was actual here. Except one period, 1977 to 1981, always actual one is higher than target. So that means that it is above the target, so that we say that it was success here. Why the export growth rate? Target actual is, for example, first export growth rate target was 28%, but the actual one is 38. It's far higher than that. So that we may say it's successful, except the period of 1977 to 1981. That was a story here. And inflation rate is quite high from 1960s and 70s, but as you can see, certainly it fall down. So the government was strongly trying to catch this inflation and successfully. So based on this data, and show that the government do lots of good jobs for this increasing growth rate and reducing inflation rate and those other things. So the Korean economy became relatively stable here. So two things, high growth rate and stable economy was achieved. The first priority was a high growth rate. Next was a achievement rate. A major policy was that here. That was the thing I like emphasize. Looking at the 1962, and 1962 is a quite old days when the president and newly elected president, he was at the time there was a major general here, and he chose some of the economic experts and say that what kind of thing we have to do. And these 3 things, basic principle was selected. The export driving policy and opening of the economy, active industrial policy, and economic infrastructure. These things should be done if Korea like to jump up. And actually he did it here, and we did it here. And what is the condition of export, the 1962? 1960, as I told you, but let's go back to the statistics here. Okay, here, as you see, 1959, about 78% of Korean people only can read and write. That means that they are just simply graduate of the elementary school, or some of them here. And highly educated people, no, very few. So that was a story, because during the colonial period, Japanese colonial period, Japanese does not want Korean has a high education. Like Indonesian too here, during this Dutch period, Dutch does not want colonial period people to have a high education. All these things happen in colonial period days is same with this. What they did in 60 is that barely Korean people can read and write. So the question is how to utilize these persons. Say, if we give the iPhone, they can't use it. They simply write down some letters and they could not write down the document here. If you give them some complicated machine, they cannot use it because only few people can read manuals. Right? That was true. So that we have to take care of, under this condition, we have to develop. That was a challenge of 1960s. And actually, they did it here. So that they choose, but their policies, that export development policies of economy here. So here are the export developed countries. And there are export developed, 1960s, there was a debate, not only in Korea, but also in all of the countries, whether we choose export developing countries or we call it alternative was import substitution policies. And in Korean cases, we have to choose export driving. Why? Because as I told you before, we did not have enough food. It's a different story for your country, other countries is that. For example, like most of the country who became independent after World War II is that some countries, bigger country, has no problem providing food. They have lots of natural resources, then they try to protect themselves. For example, Indonesia is one of them, India also one of them, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, those are the big countries try to do that because they have natural resources. At the same time, India too here, they have an antagonism for the European country. If they open, European product will come to them and invade it, then maybe another colony. So they are afraid of those things that they try to protect. But in Korean cases, we know that if you open our country, maybe Japanese product will dominate. We know US, but unfortunately, we need food. But the problem is how to get our enough food. Only way is to import. But thing is that how to, to import food, we need money. If we have money, we have to sell. So that's the reason why we have export driving. We have to sell something to get enough food. I mean, look at this. Rice is paid everywhere in today's prices here. Back in 70s here, Korean government prohibited rice from making alcoholic beverages here. In Korea, alcoholic beverage is quite popular. People drink beers and every day here. But during that time, rice is so scarce that government prohibited making rices to the alcoholic beverage. Only wheat were allowed it. So it is about 1990s that the government allowed. Okay, we have enough food, enough rices, so that rice can be used for making alcoholic beverages. So that's also the thing. So that means how the food is very scarce at the time. So the government actively promote the company to export. The slogan was this: sell everything if you can to the foreign countries and make money. With that money, we are going to buy our food. That was a story in the early days. And the small Asian country like Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong tried to do those things. There was a small country which did not have natural resources. A big country, the lack of natural resources here. That's also an important point. And also very small sizes countries. We cannot have economics of scale economy here and technology either here. So that we have to choose these things and actually did it here. And performance, also as I told you, India, some of the Latin American countries, and maybe Indonesia too here, and all the African country who try to protect the country economies that they try to do we call it import substitution policy, taking countries. About 30 years later, around 1990s, we began to get evaluated which country was a better performances. The country choose import substitution policy or the country choose export driving policies. It turns out that country taking export driving policies, export driving we call development strategy, show the better performances. So that we began to realize not only for the Korean, we did not know that actually when you say that when you 1960s, Korea when to choose those policies, we did not know this plan. We simply said that there is no alternative, we have to choose. And actually, the country taking export driving development strategy showed the better performances. And that's why the China opened. That's why the India opened in those areas. Chinese, have realized that, protecting themselves is, we call it, that they have barrier of the bamboo, they cannot develop. So that Deng Xiaoping is open the economy. India also began to open the economy here because, although they have lots of natural resources and human resources, this is not enough. So the GDP growth rate in Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore at the time, people called it 4 tigers, or 4 dragons, and were far higher than those. Growth rate is far higher than China, India, and large countries of Latin America. So people are very surprised at why this thing happened here. 1960s, everybody think that here, the country with large natural resources like India has shown to be a much higher growth rate than small countries like Korea and Taiwan. But reverse thing happened. So the scholars try to examine what happened, what's going on. And as Japan and Germany, also the loser of the World War II, recovered very quickly here. Thing is that one of the important reasons that they took export driving development strategy here. But why the export driving strategy was successful here than the other one? The reason is, here. Early days of development, 1960s, Korea can export, we call the index for the openness indexes. It means export plus import divided by GDP ratio here. So only 20%. Now it's more, sometimes almost 100%, and we are now at about 80 to 90% is level here. So it has been increased quite a bit. So the Korea became open. Early days is, as the green bar is about early days is over 20% here. In other words, it's very very difficult to find the foreign product at the time. Now everything is foreign product here. So that's what thing happened for 70 years. It's continuously open. And that was the truth. The question is that, okay, we are open. We decide to sell it. The next question is that what we are going to sell. We have something to sell here. The thing is that in the Indonesian case, you have natural resources, you have gas, and you have timber here, a lot of things to sell. But at the time, Korea has nothing to sell, but we have to decide which one to sell. And actually, you call it industrial policy. I mean, you are interested in these policies here. So industrial policy was chosen. So the industrial policy, when the Korean declared the industrial policy, there was a big debate happening. Why? That was the 21st century. Today's, you all have the concept of industrial policy. But back in 1960s, the word called industrial policy was used by actually the communist country. I mean, Soviet Union or China used industrial policy in 1960. So the Korean government announced that we're going to have industrial policy. Was a big debate that happened. Why? Look at why we have war here. There's ideological differences. North Korea used a planned economy and communism. South Korea adapted the free market economy and capitalism here. But suddenly, the guy who made a coup d'etat, and he said that he's going to make an industrial policy, which means that, okay, around 1 million people died during this Korean War to protect the regime of South Korea. That the reason is that we have to protect maybe capitalism or freedom or such as this. But suddenly, the guy who made a coup d'etat and became president said that he liked to have an industrial policy, which was used by Soviet Union at the time, or Russia, or China. So that it means that we are going to be the same country as North Korea. That was a debate there. So that they must, for the first time, they have to make it clear what is industrial policy used by Korean only. So there's a debate, and finally they clearly write, such as this. The industrial policy in planned economy or communist country is that the government decides the amount of production, way of production, and distribution. So that also, now it's a little modified, even though the China said that they are communist country, but their system is changing. But back in 50s, 60s, and China and Russia and Soviet Union used very strict this system here. Production policies, industrial policy itself, they did everything was done by the government here. But industrial policy, free market economy in Korea, and say that we have to define is that it's a strategy to encourage of the certain sectors only here, using this a few tools is that here. So often focusing on the all or some part of the manufacturing industry here. And then I will show how they promote the tools is, but thing is that here, we use the property right. We use the right of the movement or anything I choose the jobs is, those are guaranteed. But thing is that here, industrial policy by use Korean say that we're going to promote certain industry for some reason by government. That also industrial policy, they make a definition. And that was definition is quite new at the time. So that even though there are many debated, that today we accept those definitions. But back at the time, it was a very new concept here. And so that there was a debate. So government do not decide the amount of production or employment and prices. That was done in, like at the time, North Korea or Soviet Union or China. But that's the process. And here's the thing is that here, the 1970s in week here, that's a week, making a week here for ladies here. And vegan textile was some of the major industry here because, as I told you before, at the time, we only have very inexperienced workers. I mean, most of the people just only barely graduate elementary school education. Just 5 or 6 years of education, then they don't have a good skill in mathematics, they don't have a skill in engineering. So we have to use those people. the only industry was textile and maybe wig industry. So believe it or not here, the CEO of Seoul, I said CEO of Seoul Trade. The Seoul Trade is a kind of company who is exporting wig here. He paid the largest amount of income tax of Korea in 1970, like the CEO of Samsung today here. The CEO of this wig company, those means that the company was so high. The difference between the Samsung and the Seoul Trade is that here he disappeared, but Samsung survived. Because he changed his main industry from textile to the electronics. But Seoul Trade didn't do it. As times go by here, electronics became more important. Samsung survived, but he didn't here. So the similar thing is that there's similar thing happening in 2010 in China. So there are 40 years later, Chinese workers did the exact same thing what the Korean did. That's a way of developing stages, we call it. So the young ladies in late 10s or early 20s worked very hard time to make a wig and t-shirts and export here. And maybe about 30 or 40 years later, Chinese people did it here. Here's Korea in 1970s here, make a textile company here, and 2019 in Cambodia. Same machine and same way of doing here. That's why the economic development we do here. And textile garment became the most important item. Most people say that Samsung is famous for electronics, but back in 1970s, the largest item selling of the Samsung was the textile. The Samsung was famous for textile here. And the first school uniform also very important here. For the first time, school uniform was made by the large company that was a Samsung here. The first school, the middle school and high school uniform brand was we called it Elite here. That was introduced by the Samsung. So the Samsung today is very one of the largest company in the world, produce very sophisticated product. But back in the 70s, they are the company produced school uniform. Here's a Gold Star here. In 1959, a company called Gold Star, a Korean name Kumsamsa, right, was established to make a radio model A501, and the first time in Korea, so that we are able to get the radio by itself. Before that, Korean could not produce radios. That was the first radio. Size is like this size, about 30 centimeters and maybe 20 centimeters, that size. A major part was imported from Japan, actually. It was only few parts was supplied by domestic companies, say like some buttons or like that. Those are produced by Korea, but most of the inside part was supplied by Japan. So electronic industry at that time was a very labor intensive. Why? Most part was, today is capital intensive or technology intensive, but most part is imported from Japan. We just put it together, make this machine. So that was a labor intensive. And 66, Gold Star produced a black and white TV and tube here, and it's called first TV we made it. Because Gold Star VD 19166 for the first time we made it at the time. About most of the part, brown tube, that was the most important part was Sanyo and Hitachi of Japan. So we did it and make this project. Maybe some wooden part, plastic part was made in Korea, but rest of the important part was imported by Japan. And that was the 66. Then mid-70s, 10 years later, Korean can produce 80% of parts, 80, and 20% still we need Japanese assistance. And now we make the best panel TV in the world, as you see is this thing here. So how long does it take? Maybe I said, when you replaced about 80% of necessary parts, take for 10 years. Maybe the old part, maybe another 10 years more here. And Gold Star was a related chemical company. There was one other chemical company, we called it Lucky Chemical here. There was a Lucky Chemical who produced toothpaste and toothbrushes and so those company was there here. And two companies was getting together here. And they changed their names. Formerly it was Gold Star and Lucky Chemical. Lucky Chemical stands for L, Gold Star stands for G, and two getting together, we called it LG. Today's LG is made by these companies, and those are the LG here. So the baseball team in LG is called Twins, And if you go to Yeouido area, two building twins there because of the LG. L and G is coming together, so the LG here. The LG's two main industry is chemical and electronics. So they were the LGs, and that was the story. And looking at that's what very important lessons from Korea. Why? How the country with very few parts, and most of the parts imported from Japan, can transform to the world's best electronic companies. They try to replace some part and some part by themselves, and finally they get their own. How long does it take? Maybe for 40 or 50 years. The thing is that continuously they're doing, and they succeeded here. It's an LG story here. This is a Korean company, car company, I said here. This is called American Gypsies, right? It's called US, after Korean War, Korea War ended in 1953 here. After Korean War, many US soldiers pulled back their country. So the thing is, how can take care of these old vehicles, used vehicle here. So they give it to they sell to the Korean people here. Some of the Korean people, some of the men here, bought these peoples and we fixed it and make a taxi. So that in the 1950s, most of the Korean taxi was Jeep type taxis, which is Jeep was given by the US Army here. Because the people left, the thing is that the war ended in 1953. Soldiers has subsidy reduced. The war ended, then many US soldiers simply take the flight and go back to their country. What about their vehicles? They have to get rid of these vehicles and the many machines, right? So they sell at very low prices. Some of the Korean men purchase these low prices and transform to the taxi. So that was 1950, the beginning of the Korean taxis, right? Taxis. And that taxi was called Shibal taxi. The Shibal means stand up, the start here. Start taxi here, and the Jeep style taxi was there. And the Senara taxi, which is called 1960s, for the first time was made by Japanese Nissan. So the thing is that we have this assembly plant here, and everything is made by the Japan. And the Japanese Nissan car was come here and produced. That was a Senara, new Senara, right? Also new country, right? And for the first time, sedan type of car was manufactured. Not just manufactured, assembled. Most of the parties from Japan here and being here. And Hyundai Motor Car Company story was that this person was the person who purchases these American Jeeps and make a taxi and try to learn something about the automobile industry here. And finally, 1970s, he made a Korean cars. Actually, the Korean car was designed by the Italian company and equipped with the engine and transmission by Mitsubishi Automobile. It's Japan. So that although it's a first Korean car, it's not a first Korean car. It's like TV cases too. TV was introduced in LG by 1966, but it's the most important part is from Japanese. Car is two here, designed by Italian people, Italian expert here. Engine and transmission from the Nissan here. The Mitsubishi Automobile here. So the only need is like maybe seat or mirror. Those are the parts made by Korean. So we made these things. And we converted and make it, I said, more, without changing the engine and transmission, we improve it. May change in many parts by Korean party here. And for the first time here, I said, right here, I didn't say, okay, 6 pony cars was exported to Ecuador in Latin America in 1976. Thing is that even though we made a car, we could not sell the car in the foreign country. We are not confident with the quality of the car. So we choose one of the very remote country, so the Ecuador in Latin America, and sell the 6 cars. And actually, about 30 or 40 years later, we found one of these 6 cars were imported. Actually, we sold in 76, around year 2000 or something, we imported those cars. Because that was the first car was imported, so important we imported and put it in the museum. And 1986, 600,000 XL cars, so new version of Pony was exported to US and quite successful here. And that car was very successful, not because of the quality. Actually, it was a promotion by the US TV here. What kind of commercial? It's very surprising thing here. In 1991, in the U.S., LA, there was an LA riot. So riot happened here. When there has no riot, is one of the simple reason was this: there's a police chases. I mean, the police chase means when you see the American movies, the criminal driving their cars, the police is chasing, and maybe somebody shooting, and those are the things that with police chases here. 1991, the black man called Rodney King was we call it Rodney King event accident here over LA riot here in 1991. He was supposed to be stopped at the front of the policeman here, but he didn't. So the policeman chose it, and about 1 hour he chose it. He tried to get out here, and suddenly he was blocked by the many police car and stopped his car, and he was beaten like this. So it was, and also somebody's videotaped those things, and it was showed on the TV. But surprising thing is that it make a riot such as this. But another thing is that the car he drive was a Hyundai. So that before that, people say that Hyundai XL was very cheap car. It's not reliable car. It's a troublesome car. But during the choices, all these choices recorded and showed these quite excellent performances. So it was a quite surprising thing here, so that they recognize that Korean cars, although it's very cheap, it's very reliable and good cars. So those are the things. It is very sad for the American people, but very good thing for the Korean people. And here's another thing Hyundai car is 2021 Genesis. This for Tiger Wood here. He make an accident. He drive this Genesis Korean cars, and he survived without any big injuries, even though it's a very big accident here. So that people recognize the quality of Korean car, at the same time, safety of the Korean cars. So two things are very important commercial for Koreans. So that when you get this accident here, right after this few days later, Vice CEO of the Korea Hyundai Motor Car Company flew to the LA, and he gave the new cars free because it's one of the greatest commercial. So that he gave this new car to the Tiger Wood. So Tiger Wood, destroy his car by himself, and he get a new car. That's what happened. And another thing for that is a story for how to develop our industry from 40 or 60 years of stories. That at the time LG was making a very small, maybe radio, but currently make the best TV in the world. And Hyundai Motor Car Company is simply fix his American Jeeps. Then later he make one of the best car selling company in the world here. That's similar things happen. All the things are other product of similar things. And another thing for the industrial zone is today is quite popular here. Say Indonesia, you have the export zone, industrial zone. You made this, and those things are quite popular. But during this 1960s, Korea made this industrial zone. That idea was not popular here. Those industrial zone ideas actually came from the Soviet Union. If you go to the Russian area here today, Russia or maybe some of the Central Asian countries, it's a big countries, so that they could not develop everything but every region. So that they choose one of those specialisms. For example, Ukraine here. Why Ukraine is famous? Because they use their Ukraine some areas as a steel company like this. If you go to maybe Kazakhstan here, there's a certain industry here. Uzbekistan, they have certain industry. That industrial zone idea was made by the Stalin area. Because based on this Stalin area, the industrial zone, they make people move. For example, here, many Korean people living in border area, North Korea and Russian area, US, Soviet Union area here, they are forced to move to the Vladivostok, also Russia here, and to the maybe Central Asia, about 4,000 kilometers or something like that. Because Stalin said that you have to work some places in Uzbekistan because we're going to make a new industrial zone. In Uzbekistan, there's not many people living there, so that they forced to move. So some people from maybe Vladivostok to the Central Asia. At the same time here, and Stalin did not want to have people's protest, so that they also moved some of the Central Asia people to the maybe Russia area, Eastern Europe, they move it here. So that one thing is that that was made by political reason. The other reason is for the maybe focusing on the certain area development. That was the industrial zone idea. But back in 1960s, Korea chose these policies. So that also there is a debate. Right? Whether it's industrial zone is same like Soviet Union or like, but it's not here. But the idea was this here. Okay, we have to utilize our resources efficiently here. How to use that extensively, focusing on some area. And Korea is peninsula and southern Korea is divided by three parts here. One part is the metropolitan area, and one part is the southeastern part. One part is the southwestern part. So I would say that here, here is Busan. Here we are located in here. Why Busan is important? As you see, the Yellow Sea area is that the sea is not deep. The big vessel, big ship could not approach this area. And also many, as you can see, many islands over there. So that if you like a export driving policy, you have to trade. But things that is important here. On the other hand, it has a green area, it's plain area. So it's used for providing food for the rest of the world, rest of the Korea here. So that's the area, a relatively rich area for 1,000 years because it has a plain, has a food. But at least if you are born in 500 years ago, you cannot starve. But here is the difference. As you see, it's a mountain area. The food is scarce. People used to be rich people are living here. Poor people are living here. But here in this area is a deep sea. Because of the deep sea, we can approach the ship. So the Korea decided two things. Okay, we have manufacturing industry here and the service industry here. All the university was located at the time. Central government is here. So we have two focuses. And the plain area, agricultural industry, but here focusing on manufacturing industry and service industry. That was the industrial zones made. And that was a policy model at the time government made it. Okay, what are industrial policies? Then what do you have to do? Government rules. Government selected industry. That was the thing. Selecting means selecting promoting industry. What kind of industry produce? Like a wig industry or textile industry, we have to choose that. That was done by them. And government designed special industrial zone. So government make this zone around here. And they select. And company, once the industry was selected here, the company applied. Okay, I'm the person who has been in businesses for maybe 10 years, I want to apply. Then he was chosen here. Once he was chosen, he get a benefit. What kind of benefit? First of all, he is qualified, he's an assistant from the government. What kind of government? The assistant, first of all, he can have a right to make his company in the industrial zones here. What's good for the industrial zone? During this time here, electricity was a shortage here. Even during the 1960s here and even 70s here, in metropolitan Seoul area, so there was a blackout once a week, for example. So the electricity was very few here in Korea at the time, little, so shortage here. So once you get in company, once you get in the factory, industrial zone, 24 hours a day, electricity supply. At the same time, water is supplied too, and also highway speed too. So that once you get a factory in the industrial zone, either here in Seoul, means that you get a big privilege. You can run your factory 24 hours a day. Sometimes if the blackout has happened even in Seoul here, then other company maybe has in trouble. Maybe their machine may be destroyed, their machine broken here. But if you get the zone here, there's no problem with that. So it's a big privilege. Today, no problem. Every Korean area is highways connected here. Electricity is everything, water is everything. It's not a privilege anymore. But back in early days, it was a great privilege. Once you get the right to make a plant, make a factory within the industrial zone, that was a choice here. And third thing is providing the financial resources. I mean, you can get a loan at a relatively low wages. According to the statistics in 1971 here, that if you apply the loan in the commercial bank, interest rate is about 20%. But if you are selected by government, it's about half, 10%, less than 10. So it's a good privilege in financial resources. People working very hard. That's the thing. And four things division of labor is made. Four things division of labor. Government, select industrial zone. People, a company applying for the selected industry, qualified, and if not qualified, he has to buy himself. And financial institution provide the money at a low interest rate, people working hard. So these four agencies working together. And third one is infrastructure. These are the story for the the Gyeongbu Highway from Seoul to Busan. The highway is red one. 416.1 kilometers of highway connecting the Seoul is always congested with cars. But it was not easy to make these highways. It's a very interesting story there. And first time when you make it a two-lane highway, it's just this. And later it is expanded like four-way highway. But when you make it first time a two-lane highway. So construction period, February 1st of 68, 70th July. It's like 60 years ago, but only takes about 2 years and 5 months, and it was quite successful. Then it was not easy to make this highway. Okay, when Korea made this proposal, we didn't have money to make this infrastructure. It's one of the largest infrastructure projects ever made in the Korean history at that time. Yeah. So then we make a proposal. We go to World Bank. Okay, we make this proposal, and World Bank rejected that. We could not give the money to make this highway. A simple way. The reason is very simple here. This is the number of passenger cars in Korea. Okay, 1960s when they make this project here, the car is very small. So the World Bank people said, okay, and American people also said, okay, it's okay to make your highway. How many cars will drive on the car? That's the question. Okay, so the very small, that's very small. So that is rejected. So Korean government is very disappointed, and what they have to do. But it is very important. Why? Plan of Korean government was this. Okay, this project is manufacturing industry, and also there was a manufacturing industry, two major industries. Without shipping these products from to here, we cannot succeed in this export driving policy. Even if there are many factories located here, how can you send these things to foreign countries? We have to have a port here, but we have to have this highway so that they make this. Government is strong, but it depends on success of the Korean industrial policy or not. So the Gyeongbu Highway is the most important part of the government, but it was rejected. But they are very disappointed that, yeah. So their decision is that he was a military dictator, so he decided he'd do it by himself, by his own Korean money, without any resources. So because of he simply, he did a lot of things. And why? And how they make these things? How to finance these things? Okay, we use our own resources. I mean, after we decide this, Koreans pay a large amount of gasoline taxes. I mean, the world highest one. Korean gasoline prices. I mean, twice of your country's gasoline price. Why is it expensive? During this time, government raised the gasoline taxes to finance this project. And also several taxes was imposed at the time to make this highway. And actually it was one of the best achievements of dictators, Gyeongbu Highway at the time. So it depends, so it was quite successful and make these things, and Korean is a milestone, one of the important milestones to have this. And the thing is, in 1969, he decided to make this project here, the highway. The government raised the gasoline taxes. And it has passed 60 years, 40 years after we building this, the tax is not changed, never reduced. So we accomplished this project here, then it has reduced, right? It didn't do that. That's the government. They always try to keep my money, take out my money. That's a fact. So here's the industrial structure of Korea. So back in, believe it or not, in the 60s, Korea, 40% of Korean production is agriculture. So we are agriculture-based countries. Even though it's agriculture-based countries, we did not produce enough food. So there's a contradiction here. But when I say these things, so we have to, we make industrialization, focusing on the manufacturing services that because we are so desperate. But that's the difference from other countries. I mean, the resource-rich countries is could not understand it. Because if you say the Vietnam cases, Vietnam people say that okay, we are very high in agricultural industry, but their productivity is pretty high. They export large amount of rices rest of the world. And number one is Thailand, number two is Vietnam. So that their agriculture is very strong. They said that. That's okay. But in Korean cases, why we reduce agricultural sectors and manufacturing industry? Because even we are very high, most of people working in agricultural industry, your productivity is pretty low. That was the issue. So here's the production by industry, 55 in 2019. About half of the production is from agricultural product. And now it's less than, I think, 1.8. So we keep reducing. That means that people has to move from agricultural industry to the manufacturing industry. So here's the employment here. At 65, about 60% of people, 6 out of the 10 Korean people are farmers. The farming cases, actually I said that most of people just barely graduate elementary school. They are the farmers. And now, less than 4% are farmers. And also farmers are focusing on the recent days, smart farming, using computer technology to raise the farming. So big changes happen in the industrial structure here, from agricultural-based society to the manufacturing society and service. And what happened is that these people living in countryside, these people live in urban side, so the immigration happened. People has to move from countryside to the city side. For example, here, you say this area, maybe 40 years ago, this area is hills and forest area, but now it's a university located here because people move to the countryside to the area. So and at the same time, this is a service and manufacturing, and also the manufacturing industry focusing on this. At 60s, the 36.5% is the manufacturing industry is food, beverage, and tobacco. 25.2% is the textile. In other words, about 60% of people, 60% production was at the time was the food and textile, which is labor-intensive work. And you know that during the 60s and 70s, there's a Vietnam War, the Vietnam fight, and Korean soldiers were fought there. During this Korean soldiers, the Korean need Korean food. Unfortunately, Korea did not have a technology to make a dry or canned food. That was the truth, is that so the Korea has to learn how to make a canned food and actually make a canned food and later send to the Korean soldiers in Vietnam. For the first time when they go to they were not able to eat rices, Korean rices, because rice, they only eat American food. So it's not familiar. But at the time, Korean developed their canned food, Korean canned food at the time for the first time and sent to the soldiers in Vietnam. They can eat it here. So food and beverage industry at the time was part B. About all these metal, machinery, electronic machinery, precision instrument, transportation, these are the count of 13% of GDP. But today, 2020, these are the most important parts. Electronic, 31%. So the Korean industry has been changed from labor-intensive one to the technology-intensive one 60 years. So then we see the statistics, you see, then we know how these things happen. That was maybe secret of the Korea's development. How the people from farmers can transform to this workers and service workers is computer engineering. So those are the Korea's secret. So that was before the crisis, and we have a crisis here. Okay, I write these things in Korean because if I write down in English, it's too complicated. So I just explain this. Okay, that was the major company name in 1996. The largest company in Korea was Hyundai. Hyundai, right? Second is Samsung. Third is LG. Fourth is Daewoo. fifth one is Sungyong at the time, currently called SK. These are the name of the country's largest company in 1996. These are the largest company in 2020. So it means it changes Samsung, Hyundai, motor cars like this. But I'm not sure this is number 6. Number 8 is Kia. I mean the motor car company. Number 14, 16, and 17, 25, 26, 29. These are the company bankrupted in 1997 crisis. Before crisis, they are bankrupted. I mean, today's Kia produce one of the best kind of world, but at the time they are bankrupted. So that it was sold to the Hyundai. So how many companies? 5, 6, 7, 8 company, largest company, it was collapsed. And small companies more than that here. That is a crisis. Then we have to examine why this thing happened here. Why so many companies in Korea, the largest company even in Korea. And we tried. And these are the name of the largest bank in Korea. So it's the Choong, Samop, Habil, Jail, Korea Exchange Bank. I mean, you do not know this name because this bank did not exist anymore. But before 1997, here, these are the 6 largest banks in Korea. But they did not exist anymore here. So being is that it means that we make changes because it restructure the banking sector. Even though it's the largest bank, like Bank Mandalay in your country. Bank Mandalay, right? Yes. The largest bank, right? But we changes, they did not. We call this bank, so look at this. This is bank capital and non-performing loans ratio. Non-performing loans means the bad loan, which made it. The ratio is bank capital. If it is above the 100, we make the bank fail. Most of bank at time, 139%. So that this bank, even though it's the largest bank in Korea, all this get out, disappear. And here's a bank, you know that this is KB Bank. This is the largest bank in currently here. Jutek Bank is housing bank, they are merged together later. Shinhan Bank, I mean the Korea #1 bank, they claim that they are the #1. Hana Bank is also the one. And Hana and Brown merged together here. And these are other small banks, you see, above the 100 ratio, disappear. So today's the largest bank in Korea, we call it KB Bank, Shinhan Bank, Hana Bank. Hana Bank, it turns out the Citibank. It turns out the Citibank. So the largest bank at the time survived. But these are the one at the time, the smallest bank. The big large bank collapsed. They survived and they became a largest bank. It's a quite surprising story in the history of like banking industry in all of the world. How all of these 5 banks collapsed and small bank with relatively good performances and survive. Actually, Kookmin Bank, Shinhan Bank take this Choong Bank, and these 2 banks make Uri Bank. These 2 banks and merged together and restructured the Uri Bank. And Jail Bank became Standard Chartered. Seoul Bank is purchased by Hana Bank. So today's largest bank is initiated by these small banks. And also these are the, it's called Providence Bank, a local bank, regional bank here. Most of the regional bank is in trouble, so that most of the regional bank is destroyed in Turkey. So most of them are insolvent and they are local banks as collected. So that was a minus 5.1 in 1998 when the crisis happened here. So that we made restructuring during this time. Banking restructuring first happened in the June here. About June 25, banking restructuring policy was announced, and certainly few banks closed down. Restructuring happened here. That was the thing. 1 year later, the exchange rate. Like your cases, your rupees has been depreciated a lot, like Korean cases too here. Here's October of this 1997, about 900. But Christmas Eve, it was 1964. So the exchange rate jumped about more than 2.5 times. About 2 times right here this time. And that was a crisis happened here. So, and also your Indonesian rupee was also introduced. So the Asian crisis happened for exchange, the Malaysian ringgit, Indonesian rupee, Philippine peso, Korean won, Thailand baht, all these lost its values. Indonesian case is most lost its value, and Korea was here. And if you're looking at this graph, is that Korea was the fastest one here. Recover very fast here compared with other countries that you can see here. And several years later, it almost covered China. Now, the question is how we did it here. And so, this is a story we teach in the classroom this year. So one of the important reasons why we have crisis that company side. Why company side, as I told you before, these company was broke down. Then we have a vendor. Then because of this company broke down here, company broke down because of these companies get a loan from the bank. The bank is broke down here. Then you may wonder why these companies get a loan because of here. All these that came from here. Government sector industry, they give the financial assistance bank provided. So if it works very well, it's a very quick way to develop. But if it does not work, it's a collapse of the country. Right? One side is good side is if the company works very well, like LG and Samsung, it's okay. If the company borrows a lot of money from the bank and it collapses, then all the burdens goes to the bank. The bank is when countries collapses. Bank provide like a kind of, we call it public good. So that these are so that we begin to think about what was wrong. Then policy, all this framework was not working properly here. The 60s, 70s, and even early 90s, it was okay, it works. System, industrial policy was work. But during the crisis, after crisis, we realized that here a company, maybe there are many possibilities. Government choose the wrong industry. Second, the government choose the right industry, but company is not working hard. Or people did not working hard. Who made them? So either one of the things missing, then countries collapses. That we realize that here. So story is going back to we examine here. So story is that here. Thing is that here we have to people make a deposit. With this deposit goes to the bank. The banking money goes to the company, and company is successful, then economy goes very well. But unfortunately, there's a problem. Even the Kia company, like Morocco company, currently sell the best-selling kind in the world, but they were in trouble here. And they trouble here, bank company. And the bank is trouble. There are two kinds of depositors, domestic and foreign depositors. Domestic depositors are okay. Foreigners try to take out their money, so the deposit runs happen. As the deposit runs happen, money go out, exchange rate jump. That was the story of the Asian financial crisis. Not just in Korea, but other countries too. Even Indonesia, similar cases here. And Thailand is similar to the group. So we try to fix it, first of all, fix this banking system, and also this company, at the same time, the framework. So we could not use this framework, industrial policy anymore here. Sorry. We could not use this framework anymore. So we abandoned it. And what's the next one? Let's looking at the more market. So the government did not select. Company did not apply. So the financial institution, they have to do it by themselves. So everybody, government did not, even though they promoted not this way here. So the company have to decide it by itself. What kind of thing they have to do it by themselves. Banking, they have to find their way of business themselves. People, I mean, it's not related. So the big changes happen, all these things. In other words, more market-oriented system. So that everybody doing by their jobs is not at this way. So this is applied. So the financial crisis in 1997, the completely changed our system. Then it works. And also we make restructuring and workers' employment was changed by 30%. Within 1 year, the banker, about 30% of bankers lose their jobs like this. The branches decreased by maybe overseas branches reduced by 30%. But these are the restructuring happening, quite dramatic restructuring happening here. And change the regulatory system. I mean, Indonesia also changed the banking regulatory system. Bababam was introduced at the time, right? So the industrial sector was restructuring. So no more 5-year policy. Liberalization is activity. The indirect way. What kind of industry way? Maybe assisting research and development, applying making the university and research institute and company working together. That's not industrial policy. That's the kind of industrial policy was accepted, not the formal one. Industrial sector is there. So many things happen. I do not go over, but labor sector right here. So that after this big restructuring, we have growth radius jump up. Then we go on. And inflation rate, the first of 1998 was very high during the crisis because exchange rate increases right now, so then we stabilize it, succeeded it here. Export, first of all, import was reduced in 1998, but we catch up, so the economy was relatively okay. The blame for the government is this: if the idea is that if the government works very well during this time here, we may go on this, then there's no crisis. But it was a problem of the whole system. We have to fix the system, we catch up, and try to go there. And also global financial crisis happened in 2008. And exchange rate, Korea exchange rate has an increases. People called it, we have another crisis. But it turns out that Korean did nothing wrong. All these things happened in the US system. 2008 cases, the US system was a problem here, Korea was nothing wrong. But people in foreign countries looking at the Korean economy in a very suspicious way. Because just 10 years ago, Korea was a very, very poor system. But Koreans say that they fixed the system, but Americans or European people are very suspicious of looking at it. They don't know it. So that people take out their money and so they exchange it and get out. But it turns out that, banking system of US banking crisis by the exchange rate of Korea. That's the truth is that US people have in trouble, so that they try to take the money of Korea. So that was the thing happened. But as time go by, it realized that Korean system was relatively very sound. So this is non-performing loans. How many loans of the Korea is in trouble? Very low, less than 1%. It's one of the most sound countries in the world here. Even though the crisis happened in foreign country, Korean banking system is quite, non-performing loan ratio is quite low. Generally, it's at the moment, so that we are okay. During this period, as I said before, it was like 6 or 5% during the crisis in 1990. So Korean banking system was relatively okay, and industry was okay, so that they realized that Korea was a relatively good country. So that is a time for the G20 was assembled together. A few weeks ago, the G20 was assembled in Indonesia. Then before that, G20 was relatively very small. The meaning G7 is more powerful, G20 is not. But at the time, Korea and other developing countries has at the time more better performances than they getting together like Korea and other countries, Indonesia getting together, and we have a G20 here. So G20 became more popular during this time. And also, foreign exchange reserve, we do have lots of things. During this, the global financial crisis is reduced, but still is more than $200 billion. So the Korean system is relatively okay. Therefore, Korea can overcome it without any problem, so that all over the world recognize Korea's policies and industrial policy was successful. I mean, when I say the industrial policy means industrial policy before 1990s, and at the same time, after crisis, we liberalized and system was okay here. So the global financial crisis, 2008, it was 4, but then after that, it just jumped up, so that everybody was okay. But that's it. And this is a pandemic crisis here. During the pandemic crisis 2020, there was the stock price indexes, the red one. Red one is inflation, the exchange rate here. Around this March 20th, Korean stock price rapidly fall because of the pandemic, and exchange rate jumps. And these days, Korea and U.S. Federal Reserve Bank and Bank of Korea make a currency swap agreement. The currency swap agreement is very simple. Whenever Korea need, U.S. Central Bank provide a dollar, enough dollar here. Then people get there's no problem with the Korean market. The people get the confidence of the Korean financial market, and stock price increases, exchange rate stabilize. So it takes about 6 months. We reached this before the crisis level, before the pandemic level was this year, around here, this year. So that it takes about 7 months to catch up. So there's no problem with this. Another point is this is after pandemic 2000 growth rate of GDP 2020 and 2021 for 2 years. 2 years 2020 was minus 0.9, 21 is 4.0. I mean higher than any other country in G7 countries. So that Korea was successfully overcome the. I mean not successful. I said that relatively, with mild damage we can overcome in here. So the question is also okay for the overcome the pandemic. So how could it possible? This is the thing you have to learn, right? I just spent 1 hour and a half this. How does the thing here? How does the Korea have succeeded on policy? So one thing is active participation to government policy, but it's not enough. So that government also did things at the same time. What I'm saying here too. Actually, we don't know. But we just guess. Okay, we just guess. We just have a hypothesis, not theory. Just hypothesis I can show you. So here's several things I said. Let me say that this is a simple economic theory. Production depends on labor, capital, land size, raw material, technology, and others. So if you have more human basis, then you can produce more. More machine, you can produce more. More raw material, you can produce more. Technology improved, and you can produce more. So that's a simple mathematical equation, and we explain these things I'm sure. You're focusing on this capital and technology. Focusing on technology and others. This is a saving rate of Korea. Korea saving rate is about 30-35%. World average is 25. I think Indonesia may be around this 25 or a little higher than that. It means the Korean people save a lot compared with other regions instead. And with the saving rate, we have, the investment is high because resources provided by the bank and people make the investment. The investment rate is high, sometimes it's 35 and 40%. World average is 25. Because people make a large amount of saving, with the saving that provide the financial institution, thanks provide the company. And because of these things, one of the things that Koreans save much. And also that provide the financial institution, provide more resources, therefore they can have more capital. That's one hypothesis, you can say. And another thing is we call it technology shift. Why? Because this is an elementary school graduate in basis here. First of all, this is Korea. Already in 1970s, 100% people graduate elementary school. So everybody can do that right. And it is far above the world average. Also East Asian cases too here. So that we are quite successful to provide good workers in quite early ages. That's one side. As for the 80s, maybe 70s, this is the elementary school, that means the labor intensive work. Here's the school attendance here. And you see, the blue one is elementary school attendance, always 100. And red one is high school, secondary school here. High school graduate is 1969, 40% here, but around 80s already goes to 90%. That means around this area, 1980, middle of the 80s, most people graduate high school. Then he can make a good workers in manufacturing or service industry. Universities almost 100% in year 2000, but it rapidly increases. That means we are ready to have research and development these years. The education system has improved quite a lot. And here's a graduate school here. So the early days is maybe 1995 here, graduate school students numbers is not high, but up to this around this year 2000 rapidly increases. That means government focus on the research and development has been increases. So people has more focus on science and engineering and graduate schools. So here's the R&D expenditure over GDP. I mean the highest one in the world actually today here. Even the Eurozone is only that 2%, Korea is about 5%. The thing is that today issue is that we spend so much R&D expenditure, but is it efficient or not? That was the issue. But nobody say that we have to reduce. That is the only way to survive in Korea. So the catch is this: fast follow the first mover. The fast follow is that for the past 6 years is what they did is that whenever something is done in Europe, whenever something in America and Japan, we have to learn. But after year 2000, after the financial crisis, we said that we are more market-friendly system. At the same time, we must be the first mover. Then we have to spend money on the research and development. Actually, we are doing, but something is done. And as you know, the semiconductor industry, we are successful. Car industry, we are successful. We like to be a first mover, and we are doing it. And this is education February 50th. Okay, this is during the school in Korean War. And look at this, these are the tent. And the school building was destroyed, and tent was used. Even the tent was there, school teachers and people, but in the school, the two here. So the education fever is by the people here. It cannot done by the government. It's people's doing, actually did it here. So, and that was New York Times 2014. That means here's a Korean boys and girls is, here's a American teachers is, here's a Korean teachers is, here's a parent. So the Korea, it's like it's a boys and girls in Korea. It's like a child abuse. That's why the Korean people that he thinks that it is for her. He thinks it is for. She does not know, actually. Then that is a system. So there is kind of child abuse. That is said here. But it's I mean, by today's standard, maybe European standard, it is a child abuse, right? I mean, she has to spend about more than maybe school days is over 6 or 7 hours. After school, maybe 6 or 7 hours has to sleep. Maybe she goes to the bed around 11 or midnight after his school, the finishing his school studies here. So that is the thing is that is one side is for the, but I mean dark side of the Korean system here. And this is a world skill competition. I mean, I said I mentioned this world skill competition. This is happened in Spain since the 1950s until today is 45 times this year. That's for the used to be the skill workers competition here. And 67 for the first time Korean team joined. I mean, take the 10 and how many medals is? 6 medals. 2 gold, 2 silver, 1 bronze, and 1 special medal. They were so great. This is airport in Seoul here. They were popular, and they make a corporate. This is the center of the Seoul here. It's a location. Gwanghwamun areas. They are so popular. This is because after the war, Korea was one of the lowest countries, but they make a gold medal in the world. So that he was placed by the people like this here. And look at it. This is this person's name. On the plate here, look at his names and show that this person made this gold medal, silver medal. And later, we focus on the maybe skill, education. So then up to 2014, we country title maybe 19 times this. So that one of Korea is the country who made the largest medal in the world 19 times this. That means we are focusing on the skills, education, and actually we did it here. Then, okay, right. And here's the present. I mean, from 1990, the common thing of this is that they are not graduate in the normal high school. They are the graduate of the skill high schools. And these two men did not graduate at university. This man graduated high school, skill high school, we call it vocational school. vocational school graduate and go to university later. So that, I mean, and also the chairperson of some of the major company like Samsung, LG, or the chairperson of the Central Bank of Korea, they are graduate of this vocational school, not just in regular high school, actually. So that this was the thing here, we did a lot of the thing. So that we are now, the vocational school now is not popular anymore. But during the industrial period here, they provide good workers and they get a good treatment, and they are able to contribute. I mean, today's maybe those people are in the lab, research and development for this. So that's for the fast follow to the first mover here. But most of the developed countries, the fast follow. The fast follow must focus on the vocational school training. That's a way to provide the good workers. Say like this here. Go back to the simple theory here. Provide the good workers and machine and the technology. These are the combined together. We are going to operate it. Others need the system. I mean, it's a political system and the governance system, but I don't want to spend much time on this. Here is the active part of global value chain with this. ASEAN, here is the 15%. Number one is China, number two is ASEAN, Korean trade ratio. So ASEAN is important. That means Korea try to involve in the global value chain more actively. That is the Korea's how to do it. So we have to do is more actively involved in the global value chain, more focus on R&D. That is a way to, I mean, the first movers in Korea. Okay, that's the value chain. I don't have much time, so stories. Conclusion: people hardworking and studying. The high saving rate. I mean, why high saving rate? It's a tradition. I cannot say that the reason is the tradition because we are producing rice once a year. Therefore, once you have a produce of rices, then we have to keep it until next year. 12 years, that's for the tradition. So we used to save something for the future. Your country, maybe you can raise the rices 3 times a year, sometimes it's twice a year. Therefore, you have your storage of rices a little different from us. But in cases, we just want the rice probably during the winter time, there's nothing to eat. So we keep the rices for almost 12 months, and without this kind of saving, we stopped that. So that saving is always keep in mind. Hardworking companies, good entrepreneurship, and good leaders like Samsung, LG. They are good leaders actually. And good strategy for the businesses. Government success is important, and also restructuring. That's also important too here. And today they may simply guide. And it's most of the thing by the private sector's people. But if you're looking at the only private sector of today, you will think that most of the private sector works very well, but you have to have a market economy very well in many developed countries. But if you're looking at the history of Korea, it's not. We are more maybe government-oriented country, but later we changed our system. But timing was good. Therefore, you have to succeed. So that's the thing. Okay, I'm going to stop. Okay, if you have any questions, then almost noon here, so I may ask. Okay, cool.
Thank you for this presentation. I'm wondering about how you prevent corruption.
Okay, that's very. Okay, that's the thing I did yesterday's lecture is this here. I used to show some table here. I used to do some table here, but I didn't have it right here. If you're looking at the president of Korea, what happened after they finished their terms is that, and the first president was stepped down because of the revolution in 1960. Second president had just less than one year in 1961 because of coup d'etat, he stepped down. The third president was killed by his fellow man in 1979. Fourth president was because of the third president was killed. Fourth president picked the remaining terms about less than 1 year. Fifth president was after his finished term, he went to the jail because of the corruption. Sixth president has finished his term, he went to jail after corruption. Seventh president was Kim Yong-sam. He sent his son during his term because his son was take a bribe and corrupted. So he was clean, but he didn't make any crime, but his son was sent to jail. And next president, ninth president was Kim Dae-jung. He had to send his three sons together for the jail. Next president, Roh Moo-hyun, actually he was charged by corruption, so he hid himself. Next president was Lee Myung-bak, and actually few days ago he got out. Still he is in prison right there. Next president was Park Geun-hye during this scandal, strike, because she was charged with a scandal and corruption. She has to impeached actually. And next president Moon Jae-in, he just had finished his term a few months ago. So something's going on, I don't know. And now currently new president here. So that's how we Korea did to reduce the corruption. That means even the president is not exception. That's how we did it. So that if the president goes to corruption, goes to jail because of corruption, what else other person? That's why we did. I mean, two sides is that Korean say that we are very ashamed of this because we choose our president. We have to choose one of this person, but always he's sent to jail. Every 5 years we have to send our president to jail. that happened for the 30 years, almost 30 years. That was that's one side. The other side is that we are very proud that we try to do everything to reduce the corruption. All the charge was the corruption, bribery. So two things happen. So the one side is, if you're in the bright side, we are proud of it. Dark side, we are ashamed of it. Two things are going on here. That can be the answer, right?
Thank you. For the explanation, we need to know I want to ask two things. The first, how about your opinion about the triple helix concept regarding this presentation? And the second, related to the corruption, how South Korean deal with the oligarch? Yeah.
Actually, if you go, the truth is that, suppose I'm the very rich person, 1970s, and I was selected, I was a good friend in government. I was educated in high university, and then I have a privilege, then I have a chance to approach the bank finance. That means I am eligible for the 10% of loan, but most of people get the loan at the 20%. It's a big privilege. Then what is my best one? I'm going to use that money to buy a land. The land price increases, I can take a profit. That's the best easy way here. But some of the men in Korean entrepreneur did it here. But many men, as you see, the LG, Samsung, and SK didn't do it here. They did the right way. They tried to make a good product and finally succeeded and sell the rest of the world. These are the company from there, right? Company who take the right way, and good entrepreneurship is very important actually. That's the thing. But why they have a good entrepreneurship ideas is, that I cannot answer because I didn't have time to talk with them. They all of them are passed away. That died. But we say that good entrepreneurship is very, very important here. I don't know why some of the person who the businessman was corrupted and charged. Why the president was go to the jail? Because the president was connected with the corrupted company. Later it turns out to be true. Then the businessman and at the same time the president was sent to jail together here. And those things are happening for 30 years. Then we have to clean our society more and more. That's the way it is. Here. I mean, so when I look made with the people in developing countries say that they try to know that what is a quick way to do something here. But back in my story say that here, my experience is that you have to choose, you have to do it last to 20, 30, or 40 years. The reason why I show the LG story, or Samsung story, the other story, Hyundai story, is that even the best company in Korea takes about 30 years to simply make a TV. At first, they introduced like Japanese part here and fix it, and they know all the part. The 30 years, 20 years. So there is no royal world. There's no quick way. That's the way. Even if there's a short way, then something may not happen. I mean, in the case of Korea, I don't know the other country cases, but even in Korean cases too. The first question is three parties working together. What was your question?
Regarding the you present the people, companies, and government. How about the triple helix itself?
I think that, the role of government is very important, I think, in their cases. Maybe the organizing something, make a clear rule. Make a clear rule is very, very important at the time. I mean, it is also, in many cases, was related to corruption and everything here. However, if you are looking at the longer term period, it's relatively clear. And also, one more thing is that a government officer is important. I didn't mention here. Why Korean studies very hard and try to learn is that it's competition system. In other words, we have history said that government officer was chosen by the exam score is going back to about 7th century system. So 1300 years ago, we used that system. During these 1,000 years, we used that system. In other words, if you like to be a government officer, maybe 500 years ago, you have to take an exam. 1,000 years ago, you have to take an exam. If you get the highest score, you are selected. If you are not, you're not here. That system was used almost 1,000 years. So then if you like to be working in Samsung, for example, you take an exam, like any other person. There's almost no exceptions here. So I think that tradition may help. Another fair competition is very, very important. That also explains something on the why Korean people. Also, it has some problem here. I mean, so much time they have to prepare for the exam. That's also a bad thing here. But also a good side is that here that help why the Korean people make a fair competition. Fairly rule is important, like this. Okay. Question?
You said before that the government created the increasing taxes to finance the highway or other development projects. But I'm curious about what's the response of the citizen? Do they have like protests or a resistance? And if it happens,
No.
how the government handles it?
At the time, he was a dictator. At the time, he was a dictator.
No protest.
And also, he was fully supported and also he explained, by the way, we need the highway and everything. So after that, two things happened at the same time. Oil shock happened here. And because of the oil shock, he raised the tax again, the gasoline taxes. So he was a dictator. I mean, there was a debate to say that whenever dictator in African country or some Asian country mentioned the Korean dictator, he was a dictator, but he had very good things. So I'm going to dictate, I'm going to do very good things to your country, so that don't say anything to me. Actually, he was a kind of some example for the bad dictator around the world. So that was a thing here. He was some people still admire him in Korea. Some people are very against him. The two things happened here. Schumann, actually, he was a dictator. Well,
yeah, thank you, Professor. It was so good presentation. I enjoyed very much. Professor, what do you think about the role of a conglomerate, or we call it table?
Okay, right.
Do you know the numbers of percentage of the existence, the business in terms of Korean economy during 1960s until now?
Yeah.
Secondly, Professor, do you think nationalism is also an important factor for the success of Korea? You see, during the Park Chung-hee, he pounced on the need of stability. And also during the ASEAN crisis, many Koreans donate the gold to the government.
Yeah. Actually, not donated. No, not donated. Okay, look at this. Here, example cases. Nationalism is very important. in Korea. Okay, that's why Korea is so nationalism. That's why I showed already. Many slides. That's why Koreans are so national. We never will get out. Korean people are living one races, speaking one language, eating same food, more than 1,000 years. We never will get out. So that naturally we should be nationalistic. So that so that there's a problem in today here because everything when they think everything is the distribution is so narrow. Your country is large number of people, different people living there. You can think it differently, many different opinions getting together. It takes time. But in Korean cases, we live in here, same language, same food, same races, people are the same. Therefore, whenever they make a decision, very quick to move. I mean, social harmonization cost is relatively very small. But your country is different, right? Separated differences. So that's one of the reasons I said here. And donation cases, it's not actually donation. I skipped this here. Back in 1998, when the crisis happened here, there's quite an interesting story. So we need dollar. So we don't have like crisis in your country. We didn't have a dollar. Then some bright idea was made. Last page. Right here. Okay, the gold collecting campaign of 1998 actually. So there's a Korean need dollars during the crisis here. We don't have dollars. Then some of the people get an idea. If every house in Korea has a small amount of gold, if you collect the gold and sell it to the rest other countries, then you can convert to the dollar. I mean, the gold was used to be international money quite a long time. So that it is not an economist, it is not a government officers, it is a Korean Women's Association here. They have no idea of the economy, they have no idea of crisis here. They simply say that here, okay, getting golding together, then we can use it for the national country. And actually, the Korean Women's Association, they have about 300, they have first meeting, and right, about 100,000 US dollar value of gold was collected. That's called Small Korean Association. And they say that later they contact with the bank and KBS and broadcasting companies. And they said, okay, this is some kind of idea. So the producers of the Korea Broadcasting Company, KBS, the largest national broadcasting company, said that they think that they are not sure what is good thing or bad, they are successful or not. But actually, let's do it here. And they go to one of the largest banks in Korea at that time. And one of the bank, I don't know, I do not want to say his name here, but that bank declined. We don't want to do it. So then he chose another bank partner with it. And actually he did it here. KBS and Korean Housing Bank. The Korean Housing Bank did not exist anymore. Now it's KB Bank. But at the time, Korean House Bank is very small branches. Number of Korean housing banks is relatively very small. So the KBS could not find a large bank to do it. So he did the Korean House Bank and did it here, and that was quite successful. So that everybody's go to the, it's not donation, simply they send them, they bring their gold and sell it. The bank give it at a fair prices, I mean the market prices. Then bank collect this thing and sell to the rest of the world. So that anyone bring their gold to the Korea Housing Bank and purchase it at the current price is low. It's not a donation. The MBC, that was January 5 to 31, and it's successful. The NBC, other broadcasting company, did it from January 12 here. SBS, other brand, 13th, and it's successful here. How much gold was made here? 2,213 tons of gold was made. And certainly, we Koreans sell this gold to the London market, London gold market. Because of this thing, London gold market price is low. Certainly, large amount of gold is certain gold, and that is. And it is a quite successful story to represent the uniqueness of Korean cases. So 349 million people participated, and the population of Korea at the time 46 million. Number of households is 14 million. That means that 349 million people means 349 households. Used to be one person in one household setting. That means 1 out of the 5 households participated in the gold campaign, and quite successful. The London price has been around this thing before, because this Korean sales certainly sell this gold. Right. The tradition, after that, before that, Korean used to hold the gold every house is by small amount, but after that, we didn't have gold anymore. We don't, and the tradition has changed. That's a very important story. And President Barack Obama, when it comes to Korea, he mentioned it. I mean, who's next? President Trump come to Korea, he also mentioned this. And it's very famous. But not sell, but donation. Not donation, it's a sell, but quite successful. And even I sold every my gold at the time. And 20 years later, 2017, Choong Lyol, one of the largest newspaper company, made a similar survey. If you same thing happen, you're going to sell your gold again. They make the same survey. So if you same thing happen in Korea, are you going to sell your gold like this 20 years ago? And the survey results said about 50% of people will do it, 50% of people will not do it. And why 50% of people do it? You don't want to do it because he said from my experiences, if I do it here, rich people will not do it. If anything like this happens, most Koreans participated, but they have a very bad opinion on these rich people. Normal people will pay for it. They can sell it, but based on their experiences, that used to be rich people did not do it. So I don't want to sacrifice myself for the rich people. I'm willing to do it for my country, but at this time, I don't want to do it for the rich people. If the rich people show something, I will do it. That's their opinion. Quite interesting here. Okay, I think that I'd like to stop the classes.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee, for the wonderful presentation. Next, we are going to move to the next session, but I think we are going to have a photo session with Professor Lee. Maybe everyone can stand in this side, so we can take a picture with Professor Lee.